Hi.
Hello.
Hey girl,
Hi.
hey. You look stunning. I love your new
Thank
braids.
you. Thank you very much. I just got them done. This is the first time I'm getting these kind of braids done, so I'm really excited that it's pretty.
You look so good with the makeup,
Thank
just taking
you.
care of yourself.
Thank
Oh
you
my
very
gosh.
much.
It's been chaos here. The numbers for COVID-19 are rising in South Africa,
Yeah.
and we're all panicking, basically.
I can imagine. How are you coping though? How's your head processing all of it?
I'm pretty good. Taking a lot of time, obviously protecting myself. I still believe we should be self-quarantining right now. I think a lot of people have just let go of their guards, like completely relaxed. And I don't think that's such a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
I think, this is a time where we need to be more cognizant of how we're moving around. But I'm concerned about my family. My family is still very much in the townships and rural areas. So we're just going to send prayers up.
Yeah, that's really all we can do at this time. Send prayers up and do our best to be
Are we
safe.
having connection issues?
Yeah, it freezes a little bit, but I can see you now, so I think we're good. Can you hear
Great.
me though?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm really glad that you took the time to be here today. Like I'm super excited. I was going through your Instagram page and there's just so much light. I was saying before you
Thank
joined,
you.
there's just so much light on your Instagram page and I can't wait to hear hear you talk about your journey. Your life has been through various seasons, starting out having to go through the life tragedy of losing your mom and then navigating that, growing with your grandmother, and then getting education and mentorship, and then having life just blow up in front of you, and then just having to come back from all of that. I want to talk about everything with you, but let's start from the beginning, right?
Sure.
How would you summarize who you are? How would you describe yourself? What would you say about you and your journey starting out from the beginning?
Absolutely. Honestly, I've always defined myself as my grandmother's child because I was raised by my grandmother. And my only hope in life was to finish school so that I can buy my grandmother a big house and have her stop working hard. And that's always been my definition, you know. I've always strived to be more. I've always felt like as a young woman born into South Africa, there were so many confines and limitations that defined what I was or was not capable of. And I was really blessed that even though we grew up, even though I was raised in material poverty, my family had a lot of spiritual wealth. So I grew up in church. I learned how to speak English in church. And that sort of opened me up to the world. And I believe also protected me from the hardship of the streets and the reality of where I grew up. You know, I come from Rosettenville, Johannesburg South. We have the highest prostitution rates, crime rates, and of
Mm.
course, South Africa has high HIV/AIDS rates. So I've been blessed because I really had my grandmother's guidance throughout life. And my mother, too, played a role in my early life before she died. She helped shape my confidence, which is something I'm grateful for till this point, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I watched a video where you were talking about, how she held you and looked at you and told you that you must not give up and you must make something of yourself. And I can imagine just, having that be a sort of guiding light to you while navigating the rest of your life. Tell me a bit
Yeah.
about, going into the Oprah Winfrey School for Girls and what that experience was for you.
That was life changing. I didn't even know. So I knew Miss Winfrey, who we now fondly call Mom Oprah. I knew her as the woman from TV. I knew her as the woman who made people really, really happy or really sad sometimes, who gave them cars and did all these miraculous things, right? But I just never knew, I could never even think up the opportunity that came my way. I was 13 years old and my grandmother had been observing me, obviously growing into puberty. Boys are starting to pay attention to me. And naturally, she had the same concerns that had showed up in my mother's life. And she had said, I really wish we could find a boarding school for you, although it's expensive and we can't afford it. And we just prayed about it. And then I carried on with my life. And then a few weeks later, my teachers called me and a pool of about 40 other students, girls, and told us that a woman by the name of Oprah Winfrey is coming to South Africa to build a school. And even then, I wasn't really excited. Like I said, I didn't have much context until they said she's coming to build a boarding school. And it clicked like, oh, I need that. My grandmother had just been talking to me about that. So I took the papers, I ran home, and I applied. And honestly, it's just one of those surreal experiences, because out of that whole pool of 40 students from Johannesburg South, I was the first and only one to make it from the first round and then make it out of Johannesburg South and then Region 9. Over 10,000 applications came from all over South Africa to get into the school, and only about 120 of us made it into the first class in 2006. So it was a true accomplishment. We were obviously hungry and desperate. The criteria was that girls would come from previously disadvantaged circumstances but hold high merit scholarship. And a lot of us came from far and near, wanting an opportunity to change our lives. And I was really fortunate to be one of the selected few that were handpicked by Miss Winfrey herself, which was another like mind-blowing experience. It was unreal.
It must have been.
Yeah, it was crazy. We walked into this room and we were waiting for our names to be called. This was the final exam. This is after like aptitude tests and science tests and doing camps where you have big cameras in your face and they're asking you about humanitarian issues and what you're going to do about women being raped. I mean, it was intense. And the last interview, they were like, girls, you can't study for this one. Just go home and pray, or literally. And I remember thinking, what? This is crazy. And they called us back and we were waiting. My name is Nobiva, my last name. And I remember I had to wait the longest. And people would go through this door, but when they come out on the other side, they'd be like freaking out, like, screaming, falling on the floor. And I'm like wondering, what is it about this room? Like, who is in this room? What is happening? Until it was my turn to go in. And oh my God, it was the woman from TV. She was sitting right there. And she stood up and she was so gracious. I mean, I'll never forget it, you know. She said, hi, I'm Oprah. And I was like, oh my God, hi, Oprah. I'm Mpumi. And we sat and spoke, and the rest was history. My life changed forever. Yeah.
I can imagine, like, hearing you talk about it and hearing you talk about how gracious you must have been. You know, that thing where you meet someone that you just never imagined that you could meet, and then they are everything that you hoped that they would be if you ever met them. It feels like that might have been the kind of experience that you had in that moment.
It was life altering. Her humility, I mean, is still one of my favorite things about her. Her ability to make any person feel comfortable and seen, because she's still very much connected to her authentic self. And it's I really believe it's a big reason why a lot of us girls from the academy are still so authentic to ourselves, you know, in some way or another. Because we were led by a woman who was relentless in her authenticity and her command for character. You know, being raised at the academy, a boarding school, where we were young girls who were taught to value our brains, who were taught to focus on our character and the content of our hearts before looking at our exterior, before using even our bodies as a place to derive value in a world that limits a girl child to those elements, was truly liberating. I mean, it's something I'm grateful for till this day. The sort of confidence that she instilled in us was powerful.
So let's talk about how that opened up doors for you, and how that sort of just changed your life, really. Because after that, you moved to the United States, you started, you know, doing business, you started working, and life pretty much opened up. Let's talk about that journey. What was that move like?
Do you know, it's insane. I actually, so all of this really begins with my mother when she's dying, my late mother. I'm about 8 years old, and this is in 2001. You'd remember this time as when the AIDS epidemic was sweeping through sub-Saharan Africa, when we lost millions of people, and my mother was one of many of those people. But my mother did something really special. Before she died, when I was coming home from school, she had the courage to sit me down and share her truth with me. And she told me she was HIV positive. She told me she was going to die. And I didn't know what AIDS was, but I knew what death was. And she saw me panic and feel the fear. And she held me by the face and made me promise that I was going to work hard. I was going to be good to my grandmother, and that I'd never stop believing in God, that I needed to work hard in school in order to turn out differently from her. And literally from this conversation, for 1 year, 6 months, I then watched my mother die, right? Watching her go through that whole process. And in my 8-year-old, 9-year-old mind, what I'm processing is, if I don't do those things that I've promised her, if I'm not good to God, my grandmother, if I stop going to school, if I stop believing in God, I'm going to die like that, which is really the truth. Like, it became my saving grace. And she gave me a sense of courage to face up to the circumstances that were happening. And to the point that even after she died, I was the child in the family who would refuse to hide behind the stigma that I felt was such a strong veil, even in family, whenever people would, you know, her death would come up and people would whisper and not want to talk about it. And naturally, I would just speak up. And so I took that energy into the academy, where it was so well molded and shaped and supported by adults around me, to the point that I was able to share my story for the very first time on a stage at the academy in 2010. I was 17 years old, and did so well that I received a speaking invitation. And the first time I was on an airplane to go and speak in the Cape. And I shared my story there. And miraculously, then other people started inviting me. And before I knew it, this thing was happening where invitations were coming from everywhere. And this was while I was finishing my high school. I always wanted to go to the United States because I knew that a girl child has more opportunity in what was coined the land of the brave and home of the free. And I wanted to stop that. We can debate what it is now. But yeah, I then applied for scholarships, and I got a full ride scholarship to go study in the United States. And when I got to the United States, I carried on with my spirit, my conviction of not being ashamed, of owning my story, of rising beyond what people expected of me. And I didn't know that that was speaking and saying something to that international platform. And that also accelerated my career. So in a lot of ways, it wasn't until I was deep in it that I realized, oh my God, this is a business. Like, oh, I need to organize this. You know, people are starting to ask me, how much money do you charge? And I think they're crazy, because I used to write to clinics and tell people, you know, dear doctor, I know you have patients who are HIV positive. I need to come in and speak to them because they need to go and speak to their children. Like, I was that kind of person. I was writing to churches, like, can I come speak? I never in my mind ever thought this could make money. So fast forward, I'm in North America, and I have what I now call clients who would like to fly you to Toronto. How much do you charge? And I'd just be like, this is insane. I'm getting paid for my own story. So it was a complete game changer. But it happened so fast, so fast.
Was it overwhelming for you?
No.
Who did you turn to help you figure that out?
I wouldn't say overwhelming, because I'm naturally very driven. I'm naturally very hungry for success. My name is Mpumi Nobiva. It means success. And I watched my grandmother work hard her whole life. My grandmother is the kind of woman who would have a baby on her back and be literally hammering nails into her own shack with 5 other kids running around. And so I naturally come from that strength. But I had to reach out to many, many people, women, mentors, to get help. Like, people are asking me, how much do I charge? How should I charge? And women would say to me, well, when I was your age, 8 decades ago, this is how much I charge. So tell them this. And I remember when they first gave me a figure to give to a client, I was like, oh my God, that's a lot of money. These people are not going to call me back. No. And they were like, trust me, they'll call you back. And I told them my price. And then it was insane. It really just started taking off. Because I naturally love people. I have a knack for communication. And I was naturally just pulled into that gravitational demand of, I guess, just a refreshing, authentic way of telling stories, you know? And looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing about it, but I would just slow down the momentum a little bit, because it happened so fast that I have a lot of experiences that, you know, I got to speak as the first Black woman at Montverde Academy, right? It was such a big honor. in my 20s to be able to do that. But I never really got to enjoy it because I was flying from city to city. I was everywhere. The demand and it was everywhere. And I didn't have a team. I remember I designed my first logo using a Word document. I created my first website using WordPress. I did everything myself, which obviously had its pros and cons. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, listening to you, there's just so much that comes to mind. First, talking about how your mother was open and honest to you, and that in and of itself gave you a courage and a different sort of outlook to life. It makes me think about the way people are able to carve strength out of pain, right? Because you could
It's
have
my
taken that
favorite thing.
moment and held on to the pain of it. I
Yeah.
kind of lost you. What did you say?
It's my favorite thing. This concept of turning
Hey.
strengths, right? Turning wood into wins. But it does come at an expense. It does come at an expense because pain is a real thing. And that's what this recent chapter of my life has taught me. Because the trauma of having lived that life, right? So I would be this girl who would stand up on stage and speak about how I watched my mother die when I was 9 years old. She made me promise XYZ, and now I'm here. So it's this great success story. But now what we're learning is that comes at a price. Like trauma and pain has a real physical impact on your brain neurology, has a real physical impact on your biology. So when we start to think about what that meant for a 9-year-old child living in poverty to watch somebody they love die, psychologically what that does, the expense of it. So it wasn't until later in my life where these victories started to unpend deeper pains, you know, and it's been a humbling process because for a very long time, I've always been this A personality, high performing, success driven individual. And I'm not used to being vulnerable. I'm not used to being a person who is afflicted by challenges. So it's been a really humbling period of my life where I get to look back at all of that and love myself more and know that now I can design my life going forward with the health of who I am and the health of my story at the very forefront of my drive. So that the next time that wave hits, which I have no doubt, because self-development is a huge industry, it's $1 billion industry. People are always going to need encouragement and empowerment. And if you can share your story, if you are authentic, and if you have the drive to package it and be able to distribute it into the world, then you're bound to get the feedback of that. So what I've really been doing in this season after having a mental health breakdown, depression and anxiety, because, you know, now I'm in the US, I'm living in Los Angeles, I'm working, I'm grinding, but my uncle at home is suicidal because he's unemployed. Things are falling apart around me. And that caught up with me, it caught up with my spirit. It showed up in the choices I was making. I started getting really discouraged by a lot of things. And what I've learned, even by watching successful people that I've had the privilege of just getting a glimpse into their lives, is that you have to design your whole life around your well-being because your health is your wealth. It doesn't help to kill yourself in the process of chasing a dream if you're not going to live to see the fruits of your labor, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's been quite a humbling experience. I think I was favored by God in the sense that I'm only 27 years old now. So to a lot of people, it's bizarre because in a lot of ways, it feels like I'm just getting started. But now I have the wisdom of the experience. I have the wisdom of what's happened before. And I want to really embody self-love and self-care and wellness and channel that into my work so that I never burn out again from doing what I love. You know, it's just imperative that I change that approach.
I would definitely agree with that. I wanted to talk about how to recognize that, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you this. I have personally struggled with being described as a strong woman because sometimes you're so strong and you believe everyone expects you to be strong. So even when you've got pain and you've got things going on with you, you really don't know how to express it. You don't really have a person to talk to about it, and you're not able to look at yourself and tell yourself that you need help, right? So talk to me about
Right.
how that funneled for you from this person who was an A-type personality, super successful, strong, and then you get to that point where you realize, oh wow, things are going downhill. I need help. I need to reach out for help. How were you able to
Oh no,
recognize that?
I didn't even know I was depressed. I didn't even know
Mm.
I was depressed. Actually, my breakdown happened in LA after, I don't know if you know about this girl who was killed in South Africa, Uyinene. She was 19 years old and she was killed at a post office. And I
I
was
heard
in
about that,
LA.
yes.
Yes. So I was in LA getting ready to come back to South Africa because I had completed my master's degree. It was time for me to move on to the next phase of my career. But then I was petrified of South Africa because I'm like, I'm supposed to go home and young women are being killed. I had just led a campaign on domestic violence a few years from that when Karabo Mukweno, excuse me, was killed in 2016. And what happened while I was in LA is I became really depressed, but it didn't click to me that my depression was happening because in 2010, when I was still in high school, my own cousin who was 9 years old was killed in the same way. And we had found her in a shallow grave. And being the strong person that I was, I left school while I was writing exams, went to bury my cousins, and then came right back to writing exams, aced my exams, got my scholarship, and flew out the country. So I never processed any of those traumas. So now I'm in Los Angeles, I'm making money, I'm building some of the best social relationships I could ever imagine. And I'm starting to lose an enthusiasm for life. Like I wanted to spend less time around people. I became really discouraged and depressed. I felt like my life as a woman and a girl child meant nothing in this world, particularly in my own country, that you could just get killed and at the very best trend on Twitter for a couple of weeks and that's it. And what I learned is, I guess, a good way to notice a trigger is that things that were happening externally in the world were triggering me in such profound ways. Now, a person who is in harmony, a person who is in a regulated state, is not likely to be triggered the way I was being triggered. So what that indicates is that there were underlying traumas, underlying currents that were being pushed up, right? And I mean, I think that's the first sign. I mean, women like us who are growth seekers, who are these ambitious, young, energy infused, confident, A personalities who most likely don't come from wealth, have these big dreams that land us in industries. I mean, I remember when I first Googled motivational or international speaker, all I saw were white faces, middle-aged white men in their 50s, the Brian Tracys. I didn't see a little black girl from Africa in her 20s. Like, it just wasn't there. And so it happens to us a lot that we find ourselves in these industries that are not even prepared for us. So we're carrying so much pressure and we're moving so fast. So, I mean, if I could look back or tell a fellow sister, I say this to my sisters as well, you really want to slow down, because that's the thing about the ambition of success, but also the pressure of poverty. When you're coming from pressure and people where you're coming from are struggling and they're looking at you, that pressure pushes you to go so fast. But that speed, that velocity is what kills you, because when you slow down, you start to realize, you know, it's crazy now looking back that I'm most grateful for, of all the experiences I've had in life, and I've had beautiful experiences, from being able to speak at the White House during the Obama era, because I wouldn't be welcome now, to doing many other cool things. The one thing I'm really most grateful for is finding myself in a hospital bed because of depression and anxiety, and not having all the noise of the world, and literally having reality click in about how much of an individual experience this life is, and how when the lights go down, the curtains are drawn, the microphones are down, it's just you. And if you have not been taking care of you, that's where the buck stops. So it was like a huge wake-up call for me, right? To hear psychologists say to me, Mpumi, you don't understand. When we say you've been traumatized, we're not just talking about it from a theoretical standpoint that, oh, you've seen pain and now you carry pain. No, no, no. You've been traumatized as in when we say generational trauma is passed down, when your grandmother was in her mother's womb in 1944 and the colonial settlers were dismantling people, taking land, that was a trauma that your grandmother was cooked in. Then your grandmother, when she was pregnant with your mother in 1975, when the uprisings were happening and the students were being killed and Black people were massacred in townships, that was a trauma your mother was cooked in. And then your mother, when she carried you in 1993, right before the biggest democratic elections in South Africa, when shacks would be shot up and people would be killing each other, that's a trauma you were cooked in. That's just the trauma that happened before you manifested into this life. When we're speaking from your neurology, like your nervous system, there are people in the world who have never gone through what I've just told you. Yet we have lived generations of it. And then after I was born, there's the trauma of poverty. There's the trauma of seeing women around you get raped and killed. There's the trauma of family getting killed and hunger. And you carry all of this with you. And here I am sitting in Los Angeles in hospital. And I'm like, oh my God. So all this time I've been wounded. And it just made me want to love myself. Like, oh my God, I just couldn't see that. Now this makes sense. Now I understand why I never felt enough, even when I had earned my seat at the table and my name was in my chair. I still never felt enough because parts of me were missing. So things really started to crack open. You understand? I began to understand that, oh, the trauma of being fatherless is the reason I've struggled so much in male relationships and setting boundaries, because parts of me have been missing. So in a lot of ways, it was a painful experience. I mean, I can't downplay that. The trauma of just finding yourself in that chair, finding yourself on the other end of a doctor being diagnosed when all you've ever known yourself for is brilliance, success, and thriving, was such a humbling thing. But I also think the speed I was going at, the amount of success that was coming for me, I don't think I could have heard it any other way. I don't think I could have heard it any other way. And that's why in my spirit, I'm so grateful, because I know that the forces of love that know us by name, that I call God, are always with us. And those are the kind of forces that are able to inform you no matter where you are, that you need to slow down, you need to love yourself more, you need to care for yourself more. So it was a huge turning point for me, truly, like words can't explain. And to the point that now I'm able to look at my life and not feel insecure about whether or not I will succeed, whether or not I will make an impact. If anything, I'm humbled by the possibility of that, to the point that I don't want to get it wrong again. So now, how do I honor myself? How do I heal and love myself back to life? But also, how do I take this experience and bring it into life so much so that I can pass it on to somebody else with love and say, hey, here's what I've learned. And in as much as I wish success for you, in as much as these are the ways to share your story, these are the ways to create a platform and influence people, you also want to pay attention to your health. You want to pay attention to the health of your story. You want to pay attention to what you've been through and take time to heal that. You know, and it's changed my family dynamic. It's changed the way I live. It's changed the work I'm doing. And yeah, it's been quite surreal. The whole thing has been surreal.
I like that you talked about your family dynamic in there, because it's commonplace to have difficulties with discussing mental health situations or depression within African families. So what was the impact? Yeah, what was the impact of your experience to the family dynamics, you know, with people, say like other people with themselves and then with you?
Well, you know, the thing about my family is I wasn't the first to find myself being challenged from a mental health standpoint, because naturally we've seen and endured a lot of trauma. I think for my family it was scary, because for them I am the beacon of light. I am the answer the child who is the solution to our century-long oppression and struggles with poverty. Excuse me. I believe in God, so I'm going to use the term God. I believe God has used my life for my own family's wake-up call, because if the smartest, most brilliant individual to come out of the family is prone and vulnerable to these struggles, then it's a humbling reminder to everybody else that, oh my God, so it could be me too, right? It's been a wake-up call for my family, because now we're finally at a place where, I mean, I just look at my relationship with my grandmother. It's improved so much, the kind of conversations we have. You know, the last phone call we had, we were talking about how, for the first time ever, how her father was murdered when she was 14 years old, and what that did to her. Like, we're really starting to unpack a lot of things that had laid hidden and just put away because you're hungry and you need to survive. And I'm the person who, ironically, has had a wealth of experience with learning how to open people's hearts and communicate from the heart. So I'm able to do that with my family. And I'm also able to use the knowledge that I've acquired from sitting on the board of directors for the academy, where we are now a trauma-informed school system, working with leading neurologists such as Dr. Bruce Perry. Like, literally, it's one of those experiences where it's almost like I can look into my own brain and understand where I've been wounded, how I can help heal myself. And I'm bringing that information into my own family. And they trust me. They've seen me succeed independently at a young age. So they're able to let the stigma subside and take a little more bolder risks and let themselves, their true selves, be seen. So in a lot of ways, I'm meeting my family members for the first time, because I'm also meeting myself for the first time, right? And I have more courage to ask and beg. So yeah, like, it's been a humbling experience. It's been a humbling experience for us.
Talk to me a bit about the journey of coming out of depression. You know, some people go into depression and they spiral so low and somehow are not ever able to come out of that deep. So what are the specific, I don't know if you've got steps, if you've got ideas or things that you did specifically that you think helped you come out of that hole and finally come to this place?
I had to fight with everything I had. I mean, for 2 years leading up to my breakdown, I was suffering from chronic nightmares, but I never thought anything of it, right? These are the signs, right? And there was a time, even after I came out of hospital, where I found myself in a very dark space, because I felt like my life was over. I felt ashamed that I'd just gone through this experience. I wondered if anybody would ever give me the time of day if I too myself had been wounded. And then I started to remember my grandmother way back in poverty, during our hungry, dark days, whenever somebody's spirit would be unsettled in the family and somebody's having nightmares, she would always wake up and light candles and pray. She would pray. And I started remembering those things. I wake up around 3 in the morning. I have a little prayer corner in my room, and I'm praying. And then I would start reading books that Mom Oprah gave me, books that are about spirituality and healing. And I fought through that. I wanted that information. I was hungry for it. And then I started using principles and practices that I've seen people use. Yoga, meditation, dance, anything to free your energy, expression, music. I just fought through it. I think a lot of the times people keep themselves in a cage. We want to organize and package ourselves in these ways that we don't realize build prisons for us. And really, when you're in that position, when you're so low and depressed, the key is to connect to a real source. You need to find a way to connect to something that's very real for you. So for me, that's God. That's God, right? And for me, that's my mother's spirit, my ancestors. I'm an African child, and I can never shy away from that. you know, and I fought. I did everything in my capacity. I changed my eating. I looked at what I was eating and what that brought into my body, right? Some foods are very dense. They keep you low. If you eat a lot of starch and carbohydrates, you're naturally going to feel very low in energy, want to sleep more, avoid physical activity. And then there are light foods, literally foods that are colorful when you look at them, foods that make you get more energy. And so I really started, it's really the small choices, right? I started setting boundaries. I knew there were people who sucked my energy. So I had to create boundaries from those people. I needed to nourish myself back to life. And for a lot of people, that feels selfish. If you are a person like me who's naturally giving, and I'm an empath, I struggle to say no to people because I imagine how that will feel for you. But I had to get to a place where I had to teach myself all of those things in order to survive. And it continues to be a work in progress. Writing is a big thing for me, being able to write and translate my emotions. And I'm now working on a longer project on this concept of mental health and storytelling that I look forward to launching in the near future. But every day I have to work. And that's the thing Miss Winfrey tried to teach us. We just get it. Because she would always say, it's too much for you to carry alone, right? It's too big. You can't want to succeed in your life and slay the dragons and do all of this and make the money without a spiritual compass. You will run dry. You will run dry. And it's true. So having a spiritual practice, something you wake up to every day, you have to. It's the only way you can step out of it. And so I had to build that discipline and build it. And what's interesting is that whole process of how I fought through the darkness has now become the structure of my life. The structure that's carrying my well-being, where it's now second nature. That, no, I don't eat that. No, I'm not. I don't engage in that. No, this is my time. No, this is how I live. It's miraculous how it's all worked out.
I like that you mentioned boundaries, and just really hearing everything. I really want a lot of detail, but let's talk about setting boundaries, because you start out being this person who is out there, very giving. A lot of people have access to you and your energy. That is really what your business revolves around. And now you are this person who is having to set boundaries and say no. How do you cultivate that specific discipline? Because it can be hard, and people will be offended. So how do you cultivate that discipline and then also help the people you love understand that you're saying no, not just because you're being mean, but because this is what you need, so that you're a better person who can actually help them where they really need your help?
I needed to understand that for as long as I'm living from a place of pain and I'm giving from a place of scarcity, I'm not really helping anyone. I'm not. It may be temporary, right? Like giving someone money so that my ego will feel good. Like, okay, I was able to help. It's fine. No. It comes from a place of love. So there's no guilt. It takes me long to think about it. But because I love myself, because I finally understand that in order for this whole thing to be sustainable, I need to love myself. I can't give you what I don't have. And if you're willing to take from me what I don't have, then you don't love me the way I think you do. And so it's learning to be able to communicate, to say, listen, I am unable to meet your demand in this way. I'm unable to meet your request in this way because from where I sit, I need to prioritize certain things that make it impossible for me to give. And I'm sorry that I cannot support you in the way that you want, but I am here. I am here to give you advice. I am here to consider giving maybe in 6 months' time. But right now, I'm unable to do that. I had to learn it with family. Very hard. These are people I love. These are people I love. These are people I struggled with. People we would break the same piece of bread. And now suddenly I'm eating caviar and salmon and they have nothing. How do you reconcile that? It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But I needed to learn that it's okay to be the kind of person who says, I can't give you salmon, but I can give you sardine right now. and I need you to be okay with it. And when I get to a place where I can give you salmon, trust and believe that you will get salmon. But I can't give you salmon if I'm undernourished. You understand?
Yeah.
It has to come to a place of love. And when you realize that, oh, I'm not being selfish doing this. I'm being practical. I'm being wise. I'm being thoughtful. I'm being considerate of myself and my needs. It's a place of love. And so when I communicate with love, that is my intention. Hi, so-and-so, I'm so sorry for your distress and your current position. I really wish there was something I could do about it. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position where I can extend my help in that way. Da-da-da. You understand? And
I feel like that's a perfect script.
Yeah. I mean, the intention, it comes from a place of wholeness. So the guilt isn't there. Guilt is there when you're not in your alignment. Then you're bound to feel guilty. Then it's bound to feel like, oh, I'm not supposed to. No. You need to get into the seat of your soul. That's what Gary Zukov speaks about. Get into the seat of your soul so that you can connect to your authentic power, that endless source of nourishment that you get when you're deep in yourself. And when you're in that place, you'll be able to say no and do it with love and not be afraid that this person will turn away from me, that I'm going to lose a friend in this person, or even know that even if I do lose a friend, I'm going to turn out okay. But I'm not going to be okay if I put myself at risk because I'm afraid to hurt this person's feeling and put my health on the line again. Like I said, being on that hospital bed, there was no one sideways. You've got to understand. It was just me and my journal. I mean, of course, I have a community of people who love and support me. But if you really think about it, that's how people go on the edge. That's how people jump out of buildings. That's how you find people hanging in their closets, dead. Because of those moments in time where they find themselves absolutely alone.
Right.
And when you've depleted your fuel, what are you going to do when it's just you and you? You're done. I didn't have all the people I'd given to in that room. I'd been giving to people since my teens, ever since I could make a dime. And nobody was in that room with me. It's not because people hated me or whatever. No, it's just the reality of life. This is your life. You need to wake up to the responsibility of your life and understand that, oh my God, God is giving to me, but I need to connect to a bigger abundance that's going to supply my flow. But I also need to take care of that. I'm responsible. To whom much is given, much is equally required. Otherwise, God will take away my blessings until I learn how to handle them better. And I look at the people I've helped over the years, even with family, people I helped from a place of guilt, people I helped from a place of, sometimes I caused harm than good. Because sometimes God is working in people's lives, teaching them a lesson, and you're interrupting, just pouring things, trying to ease your own guilt, and you create damage on the long run. So now I'm in a place where even when I give, I want it to be from a place of love, from a place of blessing, so that I don't resent you, number one. I don't want to resent anybody. I don't want to feel like this is somebody who sucked my energy or no. I want to give from a place of love, number one. Number two, I can only give you what I have, and it must overflow before I can share. It must be in access. You understand? Because I have a responsibility to my life. I learned that on a hospital bed. I learned that. And that's the lesson I wish for everyone, because when we can start taking care of ourselves in that way, then we tap into true abundance. Because then we're not giving from scarcity, we're giving from abundance. You understand? So even if it feels small to me, when it shows up in the world, it shows up in multiplication, because it's not taking away from me. And so it can't take from whoever I give to, And it continues to be hard to set those boundaries, but it becomes easier with time. You become more discerning. Part of the reason I had so much pressure and expectation and weight is also because I created that expectation, right? Because I would be the person who would walk in and have the answers. the person who would walk in with all the grocery bags, the person who would walk in and write the check. So what you teach people is, oh, I'm the person you come for this.
And so
And then
they never try to do it themselves because you're always there to do it. They
because
just
you're
put the
there,
package, right?
which is so harmful for those people.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got yourself caught up in a machine of just, you're like a lab rat, just running. And you damage yourself, you damage your relationships, you damage the integrity of your work because you're absent to yourself. You're not mindful of, who am I being right now? How am I loving? How am I giving? To what extent? Because you teach people how to treat you. So I had taught people that you can just suck me dry and I'm going to be okay with it. And it wasn't until I was literally sucked dry of life itself that I needed to learn the lesson that when God says, when I give something to you, you need to be able to take care of it. I am trusting you with a seed. And you need, if it's a seed, it must stay buried for as long as it does until it sprouts into a plant, until it becomes a tree, until it bears fruits. And once those fruits are falling off the tree, then you feed my people. But you need to grow into the fullness of yourself first. So I was giving to people while I was still a little seed with soil. I couldn't even bring the fruits of what I could because I would take away from my own journey as soon as I got. I would just rise, and then crash. Then I would rise, and then crash. You understand? And that's no way to live. It has to start with, how can I honor what God has given me? If God gives me $10 right now, how can I honor this? I have to honor this, number one, by honoring myself, because I'm a creation and a vessel of God. My body is a temple of God. So this $10 needs to feed me. It needs to provide me shelter. It needs to give me security. Once those things are checked, then I'm able to say, what is left? And where can I meet a need? And even then, I have to be discerning. Because sometimes we give to people who have not earned the right to have us. You see? That's equally as harmful. So you need to be discerning, you know? So it's a very humbling thing. But I can tell you this much. I'll never forget a day when my family called me and they said, you know, we don't have much, but we've put together a little 20 rands, 200 rands for you because we know you're having a hard time. And I cried because I had gotten to a point where I had convinced myself that, oh, my family can never give me anything. They're so poor. I need to give. And what that means is I took their opportunity to give to me all those years.
Took their agency away, right? Yeah.
I took their agency to give to me. You understand? And so even the little they had became such a big gift to me because they were able to exercise their humanity. They couldn't do what I could do for them. But the little they did changed my life, you see. So it's really a journey of humility and also not giving from a place of ego, right? So when people hear the word ego, they naturally think arrogance. We all think Kanye West when we think ego. We think this arrogant...
That is true. That's the picture that came to mind.
That's the picture. Yeah, you say ego, you think Kanye. But the truth of the matter is ego, if you study Eckhart Tolle, if you just take time to really study spirituality, you understand that ego is the voice that's always thinking in your head, the operating system, the voice that sounds like you, it impersonates you, the voice that says, I need to help, else they won't love me. I need to give, else they'll walk away. That's ego. Because ego needs things to happen in order for it to stay intact. That needs to be dismantled. You want to get to a place where you're one with spirit and self, and everything you do is informed at the heart of who you are. So I'm not giving to you because I'm afraid that if I don't give you, you'll leave me. I'm giving because I love you, it feels good, and there's enough to go around. That's very different. It's a feeling. You feel it when somebody asks, you feel it in your heart. Before they even ask, you know the need. You already know, right? It's very different to, oh my God, what am I going to do? The guilt, and this is true.
Yeah.
And people get caught up because we think that's our identity. So you find that people are trapped in these
Cycles.
entities
Yeah.
for years. They lose their businesses because they can't say no to people. They work hard and then lose it at the end of their lives because the ego had convinced them that if I don't do this action, then I'll lose everything I have.
I think that is a very firm lesson, especially with the lesson on giving people the room to actually help you. We get so caught up being the ones to help other people that we forget that every human being wants the opportunity to help. Every human being wants the opportunity to pour into. And if you never allow a person that favor, that grace, that benefit, you take a bit of their humanity away from them. I think that's a really strong lesson that you've shared.
Yeah. And, I look at my life in the past, I see that I lacked a lot in humility. I mean, I was gracious, I was kind-hearted, I was respectful, but I lacked humility in the sense that my ego had convinced me that I have to be the one to do it. I have to be the one to figure it out. I have to be the one to help. I. And that is so detrimental because humility is exactly what you're talking about. Humility is being able to stand in the presence of things happening and understanding that I don't need to act until I'm called to act, until it's necessary. And it's okay for things to happen and not have any part of it have anything to do with me. You understand? Humility is a beautiful thing because it is what brings forth exactly what you're talking about, where you can be on the receiving end. I missed out on so much because I had taken up this active role to the point that people didn't even know how to help because I'd never give them a chance to. Again, it's like a lab rat. You're just going. So people don't even have a chance to see where your needs are. People don't have a chance to feel good about making you feel good because you're never present enough to even see another person, So it's been such a humbling experience. It really is an experience of letting go, of surrendering to a bigger force than you and understanding that I'm just a little speck of
You're a
dust
little
in a
speck.
bigger universe. I'm just a little speck of dust. And things are going to be okay. And sometimes I'm going to be able to help. Sometimes I'm not. And that's fine. The world is not going to stop. The sun is still going to rise the next day. You need that humility. Otherwise, you cause a lot of damage because your idea is that the world is operating and orbiting around you, which is such a sad reality,
I feel like I could go on talking with you for hours on end because, this last bit that you shared is something that is very personal and real to me. I can completely relate. And looking at the comments that I see here, it seems like a lot of people who are tuned in right now can relate, but we're running short on time. I'm going to ask two things of you. First of all, I'm going to ask two things of you. First of all, is it okay to connect with you? I'm sure there are people who want to connect with you outside of this conversation. I would want to connect with you outside of the conversation. Is it okay to connect with you just to have a conversation and just kind of like know more about your journey and just what you know about figuring out and coming to this place of alignment where you no longer feel the pressure to be any type of person, really?
No, to act, right? Oh, it's so exhausting. Yeah, like people DM me a lot, and I usually like send voice note responses. I love having community. I love sharing lessons. It's just my thing. It makes me feel alive. And I'm working on a mental health and storytelling website. I want to do this full time. And so what I'm building is a membership community where every month we're anchoring, we're setting intentions, we're pulling things apart, but also we're in community because what my experience has been showing me in the DMs is that so many of us are going through the same things, but we're so isolated in our experiences. So I would encourage anyone to go ahead and slide in my DMs, but look forward to the community. I think we're projected to go live end of July, August, and I'm really praying about that, to just have a community that convenes every month to just come and center, build, share experiences, share knowledge, share books. We really need that, particularly on the African continent. I feel like it's really
absolutely.
But the whole world
that's definitely a gap.
Yeah.
So the final thing I'm going to ask of you, we've got about 3 minutes. in one sentence, how would you use the word strength, right? I want you to use that word and give one final message, takeaway to everyone who tunes in and listens to this session.
Strength for me is knowing when to hold on and when to let go.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. It's been really beautiful having you on here. And I hope that I get to have a conversation with you, whether it's on here, outside of here, but you definitely are going a lot of places. And I look forward to your journey. I look forward to all of the people who will hear you, see you, experience you, and through your light, find theirs as well. Thank you so much.
A blessing. Thank you. You're going to have to tell me where you got those braids, girl. I'm going to come to Nigeria.
I'll hook you up. All right.
Thank you so
much, Mpumi. Have a beautiful one. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.